Good evening. Please let me know if you can hear my voice. That way I know everything is working on my end. Well, and everything on your end. So let me know if you can hear me. And it looks like we have a couple people here right now. But we're going to go ahead and get started as soon as I know that you can hear me. All right. We are going to get started then. And all the other Baptists can join us when they finally get here. So, let's see. Let me get my slides ready here. And we are on day 3 of this week of our money mindset class. And day 1 was an introduction, more or less. And day 2, on Tuesday, we talked about budgeting. And as we talked about on Monday, good money management begins by having the right mindset toward money. So that is the whole point of what we're doing this week, is to make sure that we have the right mindset so that then carries over into our habits and our attitudes and just the way we interact with our money. So budgeting, we talked about how budgeting is planning. And so if you make a budget, you are making a plan for your money. You're deciding where it's going to go, what you're going to do with it. You're planning how much you're going to have for later in life. And so we also talked about how budgeting doesn't just apply to money, it also applies to your time and your other resources. And so budgeting is a good thing to think through in all of life, not just money. So we talked about that, and we talked about how wise people make a plan and they follow them. And so when you make a budget, it's not just something you put down on paper and it looks great and you did what you're supposed to do, but it's also something you intend to follow through with and actually stick to the budget that you put together. So we talked also about some benefits of budgeting, and we looked at 4 things on this list. The first 4: gaining control of your finances, reducing financial stress, and more than just financial stress. If you can reduce your financial stress, you really reduce a lot of your stress in life. Number 3, identify areas for savings. And number 4, working toward long-term goals. And number 5 that I added for today is staying out of debt is one of the benefits of budgeting. And so tonight we are going to talk about debt, and we are also going to talk about a really common factor in a lot of people's debt, and that's credit cards. So tonight we're talking about debt and credit cards. And as a reminder, God doesn't call money good or bad. He talks about money as in the way that those who understand it and use it wisely are able to benefit from it. And those who have the wrong attitude, the wrong mindset about money, are not going to use it wisely. And so we looked at several principles in the Bible as it pertains to money. We looked at stewardship, contentment, diligence and hard work, generosity and giving, avoiding greed and materialism, avoiding debt, and trusting in God. Those are all things that the Bible talks about as it relates to money. And all of those things apply to budgeting. So if you're a good steward, you budget your money. Budgeting helps you to be content. Budgeting is something that takes hard work and diligence. Budgeting helps you give, it helps you avoid greed, it helps you avoid debt, and budgeting helps you trust in God. But also, as we look at this list, we realize that all of these principles apply in one way or another to debt. So if we are good stewards, we will minimize the amount of debt that we have. Oftentimes, people who are in a lot of debt are also the same people who are discontent, and so they go into debt to get things that they think they need. Often people who are in debt are those who haven't worked hard to stay out of it, or they see debt as a way to get the things they want rather than working for it. And you can go on down the list. Debt in some way or another is affected by each of these different principles. So that's just a brief overview about the biblical principles on money. And now I'm going to ask you if you will share in the chat some reasons that people have debt. There are a lot of them, so I don't expect you to come up with all the reasons. And also, some people may disagree on different things. Someone may say, well, everyone who is in debt is lazy. And then another person may say, well, no, that's not always the case. And so there may be some different views, too, on why people have debt. But I want to hear from you guys. So in the chat, let me know what you think. Why people often have one kind of debt or another. Maybe your family even has some debt. You don't have to tell us that, but you can share from your experience reasons that people in your family might have debt. I'll just share one for me. We have a house, and so we got a loan for a house, also known as a mortgage. And in order to do that, we had to take on, or at the time, I had to take on a good amount of debt to a bank so that I could live in a house. And so that's just one example of why people have debt. What other reasons do you guys have for people being in debt? Okay, greed, wanting things now rather than waiting. Yep, we're going to talk about that today when we talk about various forms of debt and credit cards. Medical bills, yep. Usually, you don't anticipate big medical bills. Sometimes, I mean, if you have a history of chronic illness, maybe you know that it's coming. But in large part, I would say most people don't intend or expect big medical bills to come. And when they do, if you're not able to cover all of that, you'll have some debt. Okay, Joanna, they buy something that costs more than the money they have. Yep. And one example of that would be my house, because at the time I did not have over $100,000. And so in order to get a house that I could live in, I had to take on a certain amount of debt for that reason. But sometimes it's just as simple as you want to go out to eat at a nice restaurant and you don't have the money in your bank, so you use a credit card and you pay for it, and now you have to pay it off over time. Anyone else? Reasons that people have debt. And hopefully I have my slides in the right order so that the next one will show some of those different reasons as well. Well, I will still wait to see if anyone else comes in, but because there's a delay, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide so that you'll see it when it comes through. A lot of times people have debt because their values, they value things that they aren't able to pay for. Or sometimes people have the wrong values, and so therefore they're going into debt for things they really don't need to spend money on, but they have, and now they have that thing that they didn't need, and they bought it with money that they didn't have, and so now they're in a situation where they have something they don't need, and they have to find a way to pay for it after the fact, and it probably costs more. Your expenses will reveal your values even if you don't realize it. We talked about this when we talked about budgeting, and we looked at some examples of some different budgets and said, okay, this person really values food. This one really values travel. There was one where we said, okay, this lady really values clothes. So your expenses will reveal what you consider to be important and valuable. Not only that, but if you have debt, your debt will reveal your values, even if you don't realize it. And so we'll just go back to myself. The debt that I still have on my house, which I am working on paying off, shows you that I value having a place to live and a place for my family to live. As I told you on Monday, we both went through college and graduated debt-free. We bought our vehicles without loans so that we don't have any debt there, and we haven't taken out loans for anything else. And so we are debt-free except for our house. And so the reason we have that is because we value having a place to live, a place that we can raise our family, a place that we can host people for meals, or people that are traveling and need a place to stay. We value those things very highly, and that's why we have a mortgage. And so your debt will reveal your values. Show me how you spend your time and show me how you spend your money, and I'll know exactly what is important to you. Show me where your debt is and why you have debt, and I will know exactly what is important to you. In some cases, I may even find out that financial security isn't something you value if you have a lot of debt. Sometimes that happens. So here are some reasons that people have debt. Emergencies, unexpected expenses, so one form of that could be medical bills. Accidental overspending, so you go and you buy something and you don't even realize that you didn't have enough money for it because you used your credit card, or you used a check and the check bounced and it came back and they said you didn't have enough money in your bank for the amount you put on your check. And so accidental overspending. Intentional overspending. You probably wouldn't do this with a check or with a debit card, but if you have a credit card, and a lot of people do, they will intentionally buy something, like Joanna said, that costs more money than they have because a credit card lets them do that, and it's easy. Loans. If you take out a loan for college, or a loan to buy a vehicle, those are both forms of debt that you have to pay back over time. Another reason may be inadequate income. You might not have money coming in order to provide for your basic needs, and so you have to go into debt just to pay for the basics. In some cases, your own personal standard of living may be too high. Maybe you buy too much and your income doesn't match it. And it's not because you don't have the income, it's a thing that you think you need more than you really have. And so then your income isn't able to cover it anymore. And some people just have debt because they don't realize it. This is a scary place to be if you find out that you owe money and you didn't know it. Uh, that's happened to me at times. I'll get a letter in the mail that says you owe money for this, and I look at it like, really? I didn't know that I went through a stoplight in Chicago, and but there it is. There's a picture right there on this traffic violation. It shows a picture of my car and my license plate, and so sometimes you may be in debt to people because you just don't realize it. And hopefully you can keep that at a minimal and keep it from happening as much as possible. So the key here is that debt cannot always be avoided, but in many cases it can be, especially the farther along you are in life and the more income and savings that you have built up over life. So especially now, as a teenager, as a young person, we want to help you avoid debt as much as possible. If you can do that now, you'll thank yourself in 10 years that you didn't do that, that you didn't get into too much debt or into any debt at all. A lot of people, they will get into their younger adult years, even their older adult years, and because they didn't plan ahead, because maybe they didn't receive the same kind of education that you're receiving now, they didn't realize how easy it was to get in debt and how hard it is to get out of debt. And so if we can set you up for success right now and keep that from ever happening, you're going to be able to do so much more in life and so much more in ministry and so much more for your family if you just start with those good habits now that keep you out of debt. So that is what we want to do. Many people struggle with money because they spend money on whatever they want and whenever they want, rather than choosing to use their money on things that are most important to them. And usually this happens because they did not make a plan. We talked about budgeting and how that is a plan. And we also bad values and priorities that you don't realize you have that are wasting your money. One thing we didn't talk a lot about when we talked about budgeting was having an emergency fund. So we did talk about a lot of things in life that are bigger expenses, like a car, something you're not paying for every month. You're not buying a car every month. You're not paying for camp every month. So we talked about budgeting and how you can plan ahead so that you're paying for those things little by little, or saving up for those things little by little so that when that time comes, you're able to cover that expense. But we didn't really talk about emergency funds. So I want to talk about this for just a moment here. How many of you like it when everything goes according to plan? If that's you, just in the chat say, that's me. I like everything to go according to plan. How do you respond in life when big things don't go according to plan? So you've planned something out for weeks, maybe even months, and then you get to that day, that time, and things just start to fall apart. How do you respond? Maybe it's a vacation. Maybe you planned to go to this state and you were going to stay in this hotel and you were going to eat these foods and you were going to go to this park or this monument, and you get there and you find out the hotel is remodeling and they can't honor your reservation and they won't book you in another one. Or you get to this place that you really wanted to see, this historical site, and they're closed down because of some pandemic or whatever. All sorts of things can happen and not go according to plan when you wanted it to. Okay, yep. Most of us, as I'm seeing here in the chat, most of us do like it when things go according to plan. So I would encourage you, always have a backup plan. Have a backup plan not just for your money, but for your ministries. Have a backup plan for your vacations. Have a backup plan even for work. So you decide, okay, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to apply for this one. They've told me that I can work there. I just have to go through the process. But be ready just in case something happens and that doesn't work out. Oftentimes, the things that go wrong in life, it's the people who don't have the backup plans that get the most frustrated, experience the most failures. Whereas the people who had the backup plan were able to go straight to the backup plan, and even though it might not be exactly like the original plan, things were still able to go well because they thought ahead and they were prepared. So another thing is, if you plan something and then you can't even think of a backup plan, like you say, well, if I were to do this and it doesn't go according to plan, I literally have no other option. I would encourage you, think twice about whether or not you actually want to go through with the original plan. You don't want to spend so much money on something and then an emergency comes up and then all of a sudden you can't do what you originally planned. And we're not going to talk about insurance today, but insurance is a form of a backup plan. That's why people want if you're going to drive, you have to have car insurance, because nobody plans on being in a car accident. But car accidents happen every single day. And so you need to have insurance to cover you when things don't go as planned. Anyway, so enough on that. But an emergency fund in your budget is a backup plan. And so make sure that you have a emergency fund built into your budget so that when unexpected expenses come up, you're ready to cover them, and that will keep you from going into debt. Right now, as I donate plasma, I've been donating now, I'm coming up on my, 3-year anniversary of, it might only be my 2-year anniversary, yeah. I started in 2021 of donating plasma again. I did it while I was in college, but I started back up again in 2021 because the company that I used to donate with opened up a place in St. Paul, and I really enjoyed my experience with them in the past, so I thought, why not? I could use some extra income right now, so I started donating again. And now, almost 2 years later, I have saved up over $10,300 from donating plasma. And all of that is sitting there. I haven't even touched it. I haven't used any of it yet. And so now what it has become is a backup plan, an emergency fund for me if something really goes wrong and I need up to $10,000 that I have really easy access to. So yeah, it's not in a bank. It's not earning interest on anything. But that's not the point. It's there in case something goes wrong and I really need money quickly, and a lot of it. And so BioLife, donating plasma, has become a nice emergency fund for me. Side note, if you are interested in donating plasma, you want to do it, highly recommend it. It's not for everyone, especially if you don't like needles. But I also don't like needles, and I'm doing it. And so anyway, that is a form of a backup plan, an emergency fund. So if you plan ahead for big expenses, that will help you stay out of debt. Not always. There will be times when you have an emergency fund and it doesn't cover everything you need. But for the most part, that is a great way to keep debt from coming upon you unexpectedly. And often the people who have the emergency funds are the ones who don't have things happen to them that they actually need to pay for, emergencies and such, because for whatever reason, um, it just seems like that in life, that the people who are most prepared are the ones who don't need it as much as the ones who didn't do any preparing, and they're always having things come up that they need money for, or things didn't go according to plan. So I think there is a principle there that's biblical, that if you treat life and your finances wisely and you're always prepared for whatever may happen, your chances of those things actually happening are going to be less. Um, Either that, or you're just so prepared it comes along and it's no big deal to you because you were ready for it. So we did talk about several big expenses: a house, a car, missions trip for some of you, vacation, gifts, camp, college, house repairs, retirement. Plan ahead for those things, budget them now, and we want to include in here emergencies as well. Always be prepared for those ahead of time to keep your debt as minimal as possible. Now we're going to talk about specifically debt that I personally don't recommend. I don't recommend credit card debt. It's one of the worst forms of debt because it piles up so quickly and it keeps you in debt for so long. It's so hard to get out of it once you get in it because the interest on credit cards are just so high. Student loans, I don't recommend those either because typically the people who take out the loans are also not the ones who work hard to pay for schooling, and so they'll go through school not working much because they know that they have the loans to cover them, and then at the end they get out of school and now the interest starts kicking in, and now they really have to work hard to pay off the loans. And there's just so many people in this world that have such high student loan debt that I just don't think it's really a good idea. I do have some friends in college who did have student loans and they worked really hard to pay them off, and that it was really good. They were able to get debt free within a year of school because they actually were intentional about it. But a lot of people are not. Car loans, I don't recommend car loans because often, if you do your research, you can find a decent car for yourself that will do the job and will not require any debt on your part. Now, is this always the case? No. Sometimes a person really needs a car and they really have to go into a little bit of debt to get that car. So that does happen sometimes. But there are a lot of kids in high school who will buy like a sports car and take out a loan to do it. And then later on in life they'll say, yeah, that was not a wise decision. And sometimes people just don't need as nice of a car. You don't need a 2023 car to drive around. You can get by with a 2015, or I mean the cars we have right now, two of them are 2000s and one of them's a 2001. You do have to be careful because if you buy a used car or a car with high miles or a car that's really old, it might need repairs that would actually they would actually cost more to repair them than it would be if you just got a car that didn't have all those things wrong with it. So that's why I say you need to do your research. But we have been able to get all of our vehicles debt free without taking out a car loan, and they have served us well for a long time. The other reason is because cars typically go down in value the longer you have them. That's not always the case. Because of COVID and the whole supply and demand of vehicles, it's actually been such that some people who bought cars in 2020 the car is worth more now because there's such a high demand. But that is it throughout history. That is an anomaly. That is not normal. Most of the time, cars drop in value quite significantly the newer that they are. Um, and what you don't want to happen is you have a car that's really nice and you got a car loan for it, and then you are paying more for the car than what it's really worth as it's losing value. Or you are in a car accident and you lose that vehicle and your insurance doesn't pay for all of it, and now you're still paying for a car that you don't even own or drive around anymore. That has happened to people that I know, and not a good situation to be in. So as much as possible, if you can just avoid the car loans at your age, it's a really good idea. And debt to family. This is one you really want to avoid, because when you borrow money from someone in your family and you can't pay it off, it's not really fun when you're around them, because they're in the back of their mind, they're thinking, I really need this money back, but do I say that? Or how are they going to respond? Or maybe even you don't want to be around that person as much, because you know that, as the Bible says, you're a slave to them now because they loaned you money. And especially significant amounts of money, like $5, okay. They loan you $5 at the store, you get home and you pay them back. That's fine. But if you needed a couple $1,000 and you got a family member to loan it to you, how are you going to pay it off? How soon are you going to pay it off? And what is your relationship going to be with them until you actually do that? Usually not very good. So try to avoid the loans from the family, whether that's borrowing from somebody or loaning to somebody. And the higher the amount gets, the worse the idea it is. Keep it to like $5, $10 if you really need to do that. Okay, debt that can be good, and there are different views on this. Some people would say that it's never good to have any debt, that even buying a house with a loan is a bad idea. And there are going to be people who would say, look at my last list and say, you know what? Student loans can be good because they enable you to go through school and become a doctor or a rocket scientist or whatever. So there's different views on what debt is good and what debt is bad. These two slides here are my opinion, and you may agree, you may disagree. And so I gave you my reasons for the debt that I think is not good, and then my reasons for this one, for a house loan, also known as a mortgage. I think it can be good because it enables you to get into a house, and the other option might be renting. And a lot of times in life, rent can be just as much or almost as much as owning a house and paying a mortgage. And so the difference is that if you're renting, that money is just gone forever. But if you're putting it into your house in the form of a mortgage, and in the end you own your house, you have all that value. You keep it. But with renting, you don't. Now, something to remember, though, is when you have a mortgage, you may be paying a lot more for your house than what it's actually worth. So some of that money is still being lost forever, in a sense. What can offset this is if your house goes up in value, so that as you're paying it off, it's also keeping pace with how much money you've spent. And so in the end, hopefully you can break even. So maybe you buy this $150,000 house, but after paying all your interest, after 15 or 30 years, you've actually paid $300,000 for it. Hopefully by that time your house has actually increased in value, so it's actually worth $300,000 now, or more than that. And we call that equity. When we talk about the value that is in your house that you actually own or have paid off, that is equity. And with rent, you don't get equity. So I think that a house loan can be a good thing. There are times when people will buy a house with a loan and it actually goes down in value. The housing market crashes. And now you're stuck with something that you're paying off and it's worth less than what you even are paying off. That can happen too. So just keep all of those things in mind. There are pros and cons to having a mortgage. As I told you earlier, I do have one. The key is eliminate it as soon as you can. So each month, we're not just paying the minimum, we're paying extra up to 20-30% extra on our mortgage because I want it gone as soon as possible. And I switched from a 30-year loan originally to a 15-year loan so that I can pay it off sooner because ultimately I don't even want debt on my house. I would like to own my house and be 100% debt free. But at the moment, I do have a mortgage, and I think in the right situations, it can be a good thing. Okay, I want to talk about credit cards, and I would like you to, in the chat, tell me what do you know about credit cards? That can be anything. How it works. Maybe you know various credit card providers. Maybe you know how much trouble people can get in from using their credit cards. Just in the chat, tell me, what do you know about credit cards? Some people know a lot. Some people probably know more than they need to. Some people don't know anything except that it's this little piece of plastic that when you use it at the checkout, all of a sudden you can buy really expensive things. That tends to be the view of little kids. Like when they want you to buy them something and you say, sorry, we don't have enough money for it. It's not in our budget. And they say, well, use a credit card, right? Because they know that all you have to do is go up to the register and show your credit card and then you get to walk home with all the stuff. Hopefully you're not in that place where you think it's that magical. But let me know in the chat what you think or what you know about credit cards. I actually did not have my own credit card until the age of 24, I believe. Or maybe it was 25. So I'm 33 now. I've had a credit card for about almost 8.5 years. The reason I didn't have a credit card before the age of 24, 25 was because I grew up believing that credit cards were always bad and that there wasn't ever a reason to use a credit card because I had a debit card. I had a debit card with my bank, and I even told people, I said, why do I need a credit card? Because I can use my debit card at the gas pump, I can use it at the store. There's no reason for me to need a credit card. And so I went all the way through college and I went into seminary without having a credit card. I look back now and I realize that I didn't know much about credit cards. That's why I had the view that I had, was because I just thought, you know what, I did know that they could cause debt, and that was about it. So I said, I don't want debt, I don't need a credit card, and I didn't get one for a long time. I see here, not much. I'm assuming that comes from Gabriella. Abigail, they can cause great debt if you're not careful. Yep, and we already touched on that a little bit. We'll talk about it here some more. Anything else? Or maybe you've heard some things about credit cards and you don't know if it's true or not. If you type that in, I can hopefully enlighten you a little bit and respond to that. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, Dave Ramsey would say credit cards are always bad. You should never have them. And that, I think that might have partially influenced why I didn't have a credit card for so long, was because my parents had gone through the training with Dave Ramsey, and they had credit cards, but they were cutting back literally on the number of credit cards that they had, and so I think I grew up strongly influenced by that, by Dave Ramsey in an indirect way. I see here from the Robertsons, credit cards allow you to borrow money that you may or may not have. Yes, that is true. How does a credit card work? What are the differences between credit cards and debit cards? We'll cover that. Let's see. What is a credit score? And how do you get a credit score? Can you have too many credit cards? Is that a thing? Is it not a thing? Is that a myth? Can you make money off of credit cards? If I was Dave Ramsey, I would look at these two slides, and here's what I would say. I would say, you don't need to know how a credit card works, just don't get one. What are the differences between credit cards and debit cards? You don't need to know, just use a debit card. Dave Ramsey would say, credit score? Don't need a credit score, so don't worry about it. Can you have too many credit cards? Yes, one credit card is too many. And can you make money off of credit cards? Absolutely not. So that's how Dave Ramsey would answer all of those questions. Let's see, Abigail, I don't know if I'm remembering right, but you don't need a credit card for certain things. That is true. In fact, like I said, I went 24, 25 years without a credit card, living on my own, going to college, buying my gas, buying a car, all these things. I didn't need a credit card in order to do them. So you are right. Well, let's talk about this. Here are some of the main benefits of credit cards. These are not all. This is not an exhaustive list. But one of the main benefits is that credit cards are convenient. If you want to buy something at the store, you pull out your credit card and you can walk home with almost anything. Credit cards often have initial incentives or sign-up bonuses. So if you sign up and you're approved and you spend $500 in the first 3 months, you will get a $50 credit. That's just an example of a sign-up bonus, an initial incentive. Ongoing incentives. If you use this credit card, you'll get 1% cash back on all your purchases. Or let's talk about the Sam's Club credit card. If you have that one, you can get 5% back on all your gas purchases up to $6,000 in a year. So you can make up to $6,000 in gas purchases and get 5%, so $300 in cash back from using the Sam's Club credit card at the gas station. Other benefits of credit cards, they vary, but some of them include cell phone protection. If your cell phone breaks and you used that credit card to buy that cell phone, they will replace it for you or repair it for free. You buy something and you can't return it because the manufacturer won't take it back, they might offer return protection, so you can return it. For travel, if you have this credit card, you can get upgraded on flights where upgrades are available. Or let's see, if you have this credit card, you can go to airport lounges when you fly. Those are some examples of ongoing benefits. And then we have credit history and credit score. If you have a credit card, you can build up your credit history. You can build up your credit score. And basically what that is it's a score of how good you are at managing debt. That's literally what it is. So not managing money necessarily. It's how good are you at managing debt. And so credit card companies like it when a person manages their their debt well, because then they'll loan them money and let them use credit cards, and they'll know that the person will pay them back. If you want to get a mortgage, most places will ask you to provide your credit score so that they can see whether or not they can rely on you to pay your mortgage from month to month. They don't want to give money to somebody who is not going to, because then they're not going to get their money back. And in those instances, the house actually will go into the possession of the bank eventually, and they will sell it, but for a lower cost probably than what they loaned you, so they lose some money. So having a credit card can build up your credit history and your credit score so that you can buy a house or get more credit cards, basically. What are some of the dangers? It's too convenient. You can go and get almost anything you want and spend money that you don't have. As the Robertsons chatted in here, you can borrow, you can spend money that you might not have. So it's too convenient. It can encourage overspending. So because you have the credit card, on Black Friday you can buy the 80-inch TV, and it's okay because your credit card will cover it. It encourages debt. Same thing as overspending. You can go into debt. You can get the car you want. You can get the TV you want. You can get the Legos that you want. You can do all these things. You can eat at the nicest restaurants, and somebody else is going to pay for it, and you're just going to be a slave to them. And credit cards can be really hard to control. And a lot of people do struggle with using credit cards the right way because they just have bad habits. They don't budget, they overspend, they're okay with it. So a big danger of having a credit card, and you need to know this before you get a credit card if you don't have one already, and if you do have one, you should still know this, they can be extremely hard to control. That being said, I am not Dave Ramsey, and I like a lot of what Dave Ramsey says, but the main thing that I would disagree with him slightly on is that I like credit cards. And I think credit cards are a good thing when used the right way. Now, at the same time, I would say probably the majority of people should not have a single credit card, because most people do not use credit cards the right way. So if you can use credit cards in the right way, I say it's a wonderful thing. But for most people, I would say credit cards are not a good thing, and a lot of people need to have their credit cards taken away from them because it's a problem. So this is why I'm trying to educate you on credit cards so that you can decide for yourself whether they're a good thing or not, and whether or not you should have one or you should just avoid them altogether. So I'm going to give you my reasons for why I like credit cards. Once again, they are convenient. I do like it that I can go to a store and I can buy something and not have to pull out a checkbook and write it out. And in some cases, some stores don't even take checks anymore. Only credit cards or cash. So I like it that I don't have to pull out a checkbook and fill it out. And I also like it that I don't have to carry all these big bills with me, cash. Now you say, well, you could use a debit card for that. That is correct. And debit cards are also convenient. So if you don't like to carry around checks or cash and you don't want to have credit cards because you know you won't be able to control yourself, then I would say use a debit card for the convenience. Here's what most debit cards do not have that credit cards do most of the time is the sign-up bonuses. And I really like the sign-up bonuses. And sign-up bonuses have allowed me to fly internationally in business class and the nice seats, which is really great when you have a baby with you. A lot more space. Credit card bonuses have allowed me to stay in really nice hotels with points that I got from sign-up bonuses. Credit card bonuses have allowed me to get cash back and just have it as a way to pay off my credit card bills. Ongoing rewards. Now, this is the second reason that I really like credit cards, and the reason that I have several is because there are different benefits that I actually benefit from for my credit cards. So, for example, because we like to travel, we do have credit cards that give us lounge access. And so when we go to the airport, we like to get there really early so that we can go to the lounge and eat a full meal and even pick up some snacks to go before we fly. In some cases, this even saves us money because when we're traveling around the country or around the world, we don't have to stop at restaurants to get a meal in the airport and pay $12 for a McDonald's sandwich. We can go into the lounge and eat for free because we have the credit card that has that benefit. Now, you do have to understand most of these that have the better benefits have annual fees. But paying a $99 annual fee on a credit card that saves me $150 in food while I travel is worth it. Other benefits, renting cars when we are able to upgrade for free to a nicer car, like the ones I showed you on Monday, the Mustangs, or something else. Some of our credit cards have those benefits, and it just, since we place a little value on pleasure and comfort, we do like that benefit. There's other things. Once I crashed a drone while I was in the Philippines. I flew it into a power line, and because I had bought it like 2 months earlier with a credit card that had accident protection, the whole cost of the repair of that drone was covered by my credit card company. It was really nice. So there are some ongoing benefits and rewards that I really like about credit cards, and that's why I have several. I even have some that I don't even use. I have one credit card that has a $49 annual fee, and it gives me a free hotel night every year. So when we travel and we need a hotel, rather than paying $80, $150 for a hotel, we can get a free hotel night with that card that only costs us $49. So that's just an example of even a credit card I have, and I just keep it and don't use it at all, except for paying the annual fee every year. But you have to think about credit cards, and can you use them successfully and make it worth having them? Here are the keys to using credit cards successfully from my experience and from learning from others. You need to pay off the balance in full each month, and as much as possible, do it early. So, well, let me back up. Don't spend more on a credit card than you have in your bank. So if you go to a restaurant and you want to spend $30 at Culver's, but you don't have $30 in your bank, don't go to Culver's. It's as simple as that. If you have $200 in your bank and you want to go to Culver's, I would say, okay, that's a lot of money to spend when you don't have much, already, but at least you can cover it. So first of all, don't spend more money on a credit card than you already have in the bank. Then pay it off in full, your credit card bill. You're allowed to make minimum payments every month. Don't do that, because the interest on the remaining balance will start to add up every single day. Not by week, not by month, by day it will add up. And that interest compounds very quickly. So pay it off, and I like to pay mine off at the end of every month because most of my bills are due within the first week. So I pay it off at the end of the month before my bills are even due, and I pay them off in full. And then I also have set up auto pay on all my credit card accounts so that if I forget or something happens, it will automatically deduct that amount from my bank before they start to get to accrue interest. Because of that, I have never had to pay interest for any of my credit card bills because I've always only spent money that I have, and I always pay it off in full instead of carrying a balance. The big mistake people make is they don't have money and they spend it on their credit card, and then they make the minimum monthly payments while the balance continues to add up month after month, year after year, and they get in a lot of trouble. Their credit cards do have credit limits, and like a student credit card might have a limit of $500, so you can't spend more than $500 before it just stops you. That can be helpful. That can keep you from spending more money than you should be. It's actually also helpful for the banks because then they're not spending money on your behalf without you paying it off. And so the credit limits are really good for both you and them, but it's better if you don't even have to worry about the credit limit. You're just not spending that much money. Check your credit card accounts on a regular basis. Make sure you're not adding up too much money in there by buying all these things. But the key to this too is just make sure you're following a budget. If you're staying within a budget, so you know that what you're buying isn't exceeding your income, you're also not going to spend too much on your credit card because you're going to keep track of it. If you have any other ideas for using credit cards correctly and successfully, go ahead and put those in the chat because there's a lot more I could say about this, but I'm not going to be able to cover it all. But those are some of the big ones. Is don't spend more than you have in the bank already. Pay off the balance in full. Pay it off early. And just make sure you're staying within your budget. If you have a credit card that has an annual fee, make sure the benefits you're getting you're actually using and it's actually worthwhile for you. Like if a credit card has an annual fee of $99, but they only provide $30 of value to you, don't be keeping that credit card around and paying the annual fee. So every year I actually go and I look at all my annual fees. What am I paying on my cards? And if it's not worth it to me to keep because of the benefits, then I cancel it because I don't want to be paying for something that is pointless. All right, so yeah, there it is. Use a credit card like a debit card. Only spend what you have in the bank. Pay your bills early. Set up auto pay as a backup plan, like we talked about earlier, and stick to your budget. If you can't do these things, if you can't do any one of these four things, especially number 1, number 2, and number 4, if you cannot do those things and you know you won't, don't get a credit card. Just forget about it altogether. Forget that I said it was good and use a debit card. Use cash. Don't even start if you can't stick to those things. It will get bad fast and you'll wish you hadn't done it. When we talked about budgeting the other day, we talked about accountability. I would say if you're going to have a credit card, again, you should have someone to help hold you accountable for your spending habits. You want someone to keep you accountable to the plan that you made, to the budget you made. Make your plans, your budgets before you see things go on sale, before emergencies come, all those things. And when times come when you're ready to spend money, you want to spend money, look at your plan, look at your budget, and make sure someone else is holding you accountable to following that plan. Oh, this is a good one. Let your bill payer know when you use a credit card that is not used very often. Otherwise, you may have a late fee. That's a good point. I am the one who pays most of our credit card bills. Alyssa does have some credit cards where she has those set up on auto pay so that it is going on its own and covering it from our accounts. But for the most part, I pay our bills. And but there was a time, I think, when Alyssa had a new credit card and the auto pay had not been set up yet and forgot about it. And so thankfully, after calling the credit card company, they forgave all the interest in the late payment, and they said, "We see your credit history. We see that you have never missed a payment before, that you do a good job." And they canceled it. Not the card, they canceled any extra payments. So that was really nice. That happened because the auto pay wasn't set up. But it's an example of paying money on a credit card and then not realizing that it's there and not being paid. So yeah, make sure everybody is aware of what credit cards are out there, what things are being used, so that things like that don't happen. All right, your homework for tomorrow night. First of all, I want you to look at your KHL chart, your Know, Hope, Learn chart that we've been referring to. I want you to write down anything that you may have learned today, and anything that you may have learned this week that you didn't write down yet, and put that in the third column. Keep track of the things that you're learning. If you want to share that with the rest of us, you can put that in the chat as well. Let us know something that you learned, or maybe something that you heard, and a myth you heard about credit cards, and we kind of cleared it up a little tonight. So do that. And your homework for tomorrow is, I want you to send me an email with a picture of your KHL chart so I can see what you've learned and see if there's anything that you hoped you would learn that maybe we haven't covered yet, so we can cover that tomorrow. And I want you to find someone to keep you accountable with your finances so you don't go into debt. So maybe that's just somebody else in your family. Maybe that's a spouse. If you're younger, maybe that's a parent. Maybe you don't make any money, and so you say, well, I don't need someone to keep me accountable. Well, at least you could find that person now, and then when the time comes when you start making $2,000 every day, then someone can start keeping you accountable. That'd be a good thing. So find an accountability partner. If you don't, and someday you go into debt, you'll think back to this time when I told you that you should do that. And you won't tell me, you won't send me a message or anything, but you'll think about it and realize that you should have done that. All right. Questions? Thoughts? Anything you disagree with about credit cards? Anything you want some clarification on? Any of you have $100,000 in debt and you want some advice on how to get out? We didn't cover how to get out of debt tonight because I'm hoping that most of you don't have any yet. And so the goal was to help give you ideas on how to stay out, and so that that doesn't even become an issue. But if you have some debt and you want some advice on how to get out, I'd be glad to talk with you about that as well. Even if it's not here, we could do that in private. But what questions do you have about credit cards or debt or budgeting? Anything else that we've talked about this week maybe that we haven't covered yet that you would like us to discuss right now before we're finished? Tomorrow we're going to talk about saving and investing. A really, really brief overview because we could spend weeks on this literally on talking about especially investing. But we're going to try to cover as much as we can about saving and investing tomorrow. Any questions? Let me know. If you say, I really like the idea of getting a credit card and I don't have one yet, can you help me figure out which one I should do or when I should do it? Or you say, I have some credit cards, but I'm wondering if there's better ones out there so that I'm making better use of my whatever. I can help with that as well. But the key is, remember, if you're going to get credit cards or get new credit cards, make sure you're responsible first. If you know yourself and you know you can't control yourself, don't start. And I have credit cards that I wouldn't recommend to some of you because you don't travel much. But one thing is, if I had some of those credit cards Like when I was in college, before I was 24, 25, if I had started with credit cards 4 or 5 years earlier, I probably would have started traveling more. I would have gotten to see more of the country because I would have been able to with some of the sign up bonuses and rewards. I really didn't start to travel much um, until I started getting credit cards and until I was almost out of college because I didn't have much money. I wasn't in debt, but I didn't have much extra money, and so I just didn't have the means to go and do some of those things. But once I got credit cards, especially with those sign up bonuses, and it enabled me then to travel more. And even now, uh, a lot of our travel, I would say half of our travel, we don't pay for in the normal sense with cash because of the benefits from our cards. But you still need to be responsible and know what you're doing. Don't just get all these uh, airline credit cards and things like that because you think it's the magic pill to traveling all over. It doesn't quite work that way. Any questions? I'm not seeing any, but I still see that people are hanging around, so I don't know if you're just wanting to hear from other people or if you have a question you want to ask and you don't know if you should. When I was in college, I was not very good at asking questions because I could never think of a question to ask. And then there were the people in class that always had the questions and they just knew the right questions to ask and got good answers, but I would listen to them and I would appreciate it, but I wouldn't know how to come up with those questions. Now I look back and I can come up with questions all the time. I think just at that time in life I didn't know how to ask good questions. You just like to hear me talk. Well, at least somebody does. Have you ever recorded a video of yourself and then you go back and listen to it and you don't like the way you sound and so you just shut it off? I think most of us have had that happen in life. But now Alyssa and I make so many videos that we have to get used to hearing ourselves and just know that, and we've become accustomed to it. So now there's not such a big difference between what we hear and what we hear from ourselves and what we hear on a video. So it's not as big of a deal to us anymore. But there, for a very long time, that bothered me to hear myself on video. Okay, Abigail, if you do think of something, let me know. And you can ask me in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. I mean, if you get on later in life and you say, I think I'm ready, I'm responsible enough to get a credit card, but you just want some more help, some advice, you can always contact us and ask us. All of you from our church have that advantage. Later in life, we may say to other people, if you want to contact me, you gotta pay us or something. But all of you here, you're our family, and so you get to contact us and ask us anything for the rest of life for free. Just don't give our phone number out to people once we become famous, because we don't want spam. Well, I'll give it another little bit here, but if there are no more questions, then I will end so that I can go spend time with my family. And we had a car breakdown today, so I need to go figure that out too. But it wasn't such a big deal because we have an emergency fund. So it was just one of those things like, okay, well, we'll see what's wrong, but not like a huge emergency. Abigail, when we get to heaven, I would recommend you can ask me questions, but there's going to be people with a lot more wisdom than me up there. So you might want to ask them the hard questions and come to me for the easier ones. All right. I am going to say goodbye. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your interaction. Hopefully you learned at least one thing. And even if you didn't, hopefully somebody else learned one thing, so it made it worth all of our time. But I will talk to you again tomorrow night, same time, mostly the same place. I will send out the link. It will be a different link again, but I will send that out. And anyone who wants recordings as well, I can send those out again later from the whole week. All right, thanks. Bye.